Hey guys, welcome back. Today is Wednesday, April 8th, and I'm going to be going over your line plot classwork with you again today. And super excited because this is our last day of classwork for this week. Yay! Because this is a short week and Friday is Good Friday, you'll just have your bell ringer to do tomorrow. All right, so let's go ahead and get started on number one. On number one, it wants to know what is the most common amount of water given. Remember, most common means the one that occurs most often. That's the one that has the most X's. So when I look at my chart, I see that 1/4 has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It has more than any of the other ones. So the most common amount of water given is 1/4 cup. Okay. All right, on number two, it says how many plants were given more than 1/2 cup of water. Now, when I look at my line plot, I don't see 1/2 written as one of my numbers on there. So I'm going to have to compare them, okay? Compare the fractions to 1/2. So I'm going to start with 1/4. And remember, I like to say bottoms up just to show you how you need to cross multiply. But if you say butterfly or you just say cross multiply, that is just fine. All right, so you're going to say bottoms up. 4 times 1 is 4. Bottoms up. 2 times 1 is 2. These two are not equivalent. 1/2 is greater than 1/4. So I'm going to go on to my next one. Okay. 4 times 1 is 4. Bottoms up. 2 times 2 is 4. Because those two numbers are equivalent, that means these two fractions are equivalent. So I know that 2/4 is equal to 1/2. I'm going to write 1/2 under it just so we can clearly see our line plot. Okay, and then it wants to know how many plants were given more than 1/2 cup of water. So I'm going to look at these two numbers because those are the ones that are greater than 1/2. And it wants to know how many were given more than 1/2. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 plants that were given more than 1/2 cup of water. Okay, number 3. How many plants received 1/4 cups of water? This one is super easy because all we have to do is count the number of X's above 1/4. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were 5 plants that were given 1/4 cup of water. Okay. All right, number 4, it wants to know how many more. Okay, we know when we see how many more that we're going to be subtracting, right? So it says how many more plants received 2/4 cups of water than received 3/4 cups of water. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to count my number that received 2/4. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 plants received 2/4. And for 3/4, I just have 1 plant. So I'm going to subtract 4 minus 1, and I'm going to get 3. There were 3 plants that 3 more plants that received 2/4 cups of water than 3/4 cups of water. All right, number 5. What is the total amount of water given to all plants? So what I'm going to do here is because I have fractions and I have a whole number here, I'm going to go through and I'm going to add my fractions first. Because I know when I see the word total, that means that I'm going to have to add. Okay? So I'm going to go through and I'm going to add up all of my fractions first. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 1/4, right? So I'm going to write down 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. And I'm going to write down 4 as my denominator because I know my denominator stays the same. And then I just add my numerators. So 1 plus 1 is 2, plus 1 more is 3, plus 1 more is 4, plus 1 more is 5. So I have 5/4. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to add my 2/4. Okay. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 2/4. So I'm going to write it down 4 times. 2/4 plus 2/4 plus 2/4 plus 2/4. Again, I'm going to write down 4 as my denominator because it stays the same. And now I'm going to add my numerators. 2 plus 2 is 4. 4 plus 2 is 6. 6 plus 2 is 8. Okay, so I'm going to write my 8/4 down here so I can go back and add that in just a minute. Okay, 3/4, I only have one of those, so I can go ahead and write that down. Okay, and now I'm going to add these fractions together. I'm going to go ahead and put my 4 for my denominator, and now I can add my numerators. All right, 5 times 8 is 13. 13 plus 3 more is 16. Okay, now I don't want to leave it written as an improper fraction. I want to go ahead and turn it into a mixed number. So to turn it into a mixed number, I'm going to say 16 divided by 4. Okay, 4 will go into 16 4 times. 4 times 4 is 16, and when I subtract, I get 0, so I don't have a remainder. So that means that 16/4 is equal to 4. Okay, now that I have my answer for the fractions, I can go ahead and add in my whole numbers. And I have 1, 2, 3 ones. So that means I'm going to say 4 plus 3. And 4 plus 3 equals 7. Okay. So the total amount of water given to all of the plants is 7 cups. Okay. If you need to go back and look at some of that, I know I may have been moving a little bit fast, or it may have just been a lot to write down. Just pause it, rewind it, and look at what you need to look at again. All right, let's look at number 6. It says there were blank students who ran at track practice. So this is showing the distance run of all the students at track practice. So if I want to know how many students there were in all I have to do is go through and count my X's. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There were 11 students who ran at track practice. Easy peasy. All right, number 7. It says, what is the difference in distance? Remember, difference means that we're going to subtract between the most common distance and the least distance run. Okay, so the most common distance, remember, that's the one that has the highest number of X's. Okay, so when I look at my line plot, I see that 4/5 has more X's than any of the rest of them. Okay, so the most common distance was 4/5. Okay, the least distance run means the smallest number that I have on my line plot that has an X above it. Okay, so when I look at my line plot, the smallest number that has an X above it is 1/5. Because it says difference, I'm going to subtract. So I'm going to go ahead and write down my denominator, and then I'm going to subtract my numerators. 4 minus 1 is 3. So that means my answer would be 3/5, which is C. Okay, number 8. It says, what are the 2 least common distances run? Okay, so don't get confused when you see that. Just because you see the word 2 here, it did not say choose 2 answers. It's asking you for the 2 least common distances run. So when I go down here and get ready to choose an answer choice, I'm not going to try to choose A and B or C and D. Because if you look, each one of your answer choices gives you 2 fractions already. Okay, so if it is the least common distance run, then I'm looking for the one that has for the 2 that have the fewest number of X's. Well, when I look, 1/5 and 3/5 both have 1 X. So those are going to be my answers. I'm looking for the one that has 1/5 and 3/5. And that would be C. Okay. All right, number 9. It says, what is the combined distance run by all the students? Okay. So that means I have to take all of these numbers and I have to add them together. Okay? So, what you can do is you can write down each one of these fractions. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add up the ones that have more than one x. Okay, so for my 2/5, it has 3 x's. So I'm going to write it 3 times. 2/5 plus 2/5 plus 2/5. Okay, I know that my denominator stays the same. 2 plus 2 is 4, plus 2 more is 6. Okay, so I'm going to write that number right here. Okay. Now I'm going to add up my 4/5. Okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. So I'm going to write it down 4 times. 4/5 plus 4/5 plus 4/5 plus 4/5. Keep my denominator the same. And then I'm going to add my numerators. 4 plus 4 is 8. 8 plus 4 is 12. 12 plus 4 is 16. Okay, so that's going to be 16/5. Okay, and then I'm going to add my 5/5. And the reason I'm doing it this way is just to make it a little bit easier toward the end. When we get ready to add all of these together, I won't have quite as many numbers to write down. Okay, but if you just wanted to write down all of them together, you could. Okay, so we have 5/5 plus 5/5. My denominator stays the same, and 5 plus 5 is 10. Okay. All right, so now that I've made my numbers a little simpler to use, now I'm going to add up these fractions that I have. So I have 1/5 plus 6/5. That's all of my 2/5 combined. Plus 3/5 plus 16/5 plus 10/5. And again, we know our denominator stays the same. All right, so let's start adding our numerators. 1 plus 6 is 7. Okay, 7 plus 3 is 10. Okay. 10 plus 16 is 26. And 26 plus 10 is 36. So we have 36/5 as our answer. But when we look at our answer choice, we don't see that anywhere. That means that we're going to have to take this number and we're going to have to turn it into a mixed number. So I know that my final answer is going to have fifths as my fraction. So I'm going to go ahead and write that to the side. Okay? And now I'm going to go ahead and divide 36 by 5. Okay? 5 will go into 36 7 times. 7 times 5 is 35. And when we subtract, we get 1. So I have 7, remainder 1. That means that my answer is going to be 7 and 1. Sorry about that. 7 and 1/5. 7 and 1/5. Okay, let's look at number 10. All right, it says, how many times did Joelle garden for at least 3 hours? Well, when it says at least 3 hours here, that means it is 3 hours and any number that's greater than 3 hours. Okay, so let's count up the number of times. She did 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 total times for more than 3 hours. For at least 3 hours. Okay. All right. Number 11. And that one's in there twice. Hold on one second. All right. So this one says, how many more times did Joelle garden for 2 hours? How many more times did Joelle garden for 2 hours than 3 hours? So I'm going to look at, I know when it says how many more, that means I'm going to subtract. Okay. So she gardened for 2 hours 1, 2, 3 times. So I'm going to say 3 minus she gardened for 3 hours twice. So it'll be 3 minus 2. 3 minus 2 is going to equal 1, and that's going to be our answer. Okay? All right, number 12. What is the difference in time between the longest amount of time and the most common amount of time spent gardening? Okay, so the longest amount of time would be 3 1/2. And the most common amount of time would be 2. Okay? Now, since this 2 does not have a fraction with it, I can go ahead and subtract that from my whole number. 3 minus 2 is 1, and then I would just bring over my fraction because there was nothing to subtract it from. Okay, so my answer would be 1 1/2 hours. All right, number 13. It says, what is the combined amount of time Joelle spent gardening on the days that she gardened for 3.5 hours? So I know if it says combined, that means that I have to either add or multiply. Okay? And so let's look at it if we add. So I'm going to say 3 1/2 plus 3 1/2. Okay? Now, I can't add it like that. I'm going to have to change them into improper fractions first. So I'm going to do times and plus, times and plus. Oh, my plus sign didn't want to show up. There it is. Okay, so 2 times 3 would be 6, plus 1 more is 7. So to make that an improper fraction, it will be 7/2. And the same thing here again. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 more would be 7. Okay, that would be 7/2. And now I can add those two. 7 plus 7 is 14. And then my denominator stays the same. So it would be 2. And now I need to turn it back into a mixed number. So I would say 14 divided by 2. 2 will go into 14 7 times. 7 times 2 is 14. And when we subtract, we get 0. So there's no remainder. So my answer would just be 7. Okay. So she spent 7 hours gardening. All right. Let's look at our last one, number 14. This one says, what is the combined amount of time that Joelle spent gardening on the days that she gardened 2 hours or less? So the combined amount means that we're going to either add or multiply, right? This time we're going to add because we have different, we have whole numbers and we have mixed numbers. So we're just going to add. And we want to know on the days that she gardened 2 hours or less. So we're going to look here and here. Okay? So let's go ahead and add our mixed numbers first. And then we'll go back and we'll add in our whole numbers. Okay? So I have 1. Oh, my pen didn't want to write. There it is. 1 1/2 plus 1 1/2. Now remember, we have to make these mixed numbers improper fractions in order to add them, right? So I'm going to do times and plus, times and plus. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 more is 3. So I have 3/2. And do the same thing again. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 more is 3. I have 3/2 again. All right, remember when you add, your denominators stay the same. And 3 plus 3 is 6. Okay, so now I need to change it into a mixed number. So I'm going to have to divide 2 into 6. 2 will go into 6 3 times. 3 times 2 is 6. And when we subtract, we get 0. So there's no remainder. That means that I'm going to have a whole number for my answer, which is 3. Now, that's not the whole thing. Okay, I still have to go back and I have to add these my 2 hours in. So I have 1, 2, 3 times that she gardened for 2 hours. So that would be 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus our 3. Okay? So 2 plus 2 is 4. 4 plus 2 is 6. And 6 plus 3 is 9. Okay? So she spent a combined total of 9 hours gardening on those days that she did 2 hours or less. All right, guys, I hope that this helped you out today. I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday and take your time on all the rest of your work and have a great long weekend.